Maybe you are approaching or planning for retirement and have literally no idea where to start. Or maybe you're sitting on a lot of cash and have no idea what to do with it or where to put it to work. Or maybe you're just making a lot of money, more money than you ever thought you could. You're paying more in taxes than you made in your first job out of college, and you're trying to figure out ways to reduce that tax bill. Well, regardless of which of these arenas you fall into, the idea of hiring a financial planner, an investment advisor, a wealth advisor, a financial advisor, whatever the title might be, is probably something that is a little bit intimidating, and you're kind of at a loss for where to start. And I don't blame you. I'm a wealth advisor, and even I get confused over the differences between what different people in various industries do and what their titles mean. Spoiler alert, a title means absolutely nothing. Don't use that as a basis to hire an advisor. There's been a lot of studies done on this, and the reasons that people often don't work with or hire a financial advisor or are kind of hesitant to do so typically falls within three kind of categories. First and foremost, maybe they don't understand what an advisor even does. Secondly, they're not really sure if working with one could even bring value to justify any kind of fee or pricing the advisor might charge to work with them. And third is that they just don't think they have enough money to work with an advisor. I would argue that these are all very valid points, and I would agree that the industry does a disservice in some respects to the general public or to potential clients in identifying what an individual advisor does, how they're different from other advisors that we might Google or see on TV. And lastly, if working with one actually brings the value that you would want, that's going to be in excess of what you're paying them. That's ultimately the goal, right? To bring more value than what you pay them each year. And so the point or goal of today's video is to provide you 5 questions to ask any advisor. You can even email them to an advisor that you're thinking about working with. To provide 5 questions to ask any advisor that they could answer very simply that will help you determine if it's going to be a good fit for you and ultimately if it's someone you could see yourself working with over the long term. First and foremost, before we get into any questions, it's important to remember that it might take you interviewing 1, 3, 5 individual advisors to determine who's going to be a good fit for you. A referral from a colleague or someone you work with or someone you trust or know could be a good place to start, but maybe not necessarily so. And so thinking about whether it's someone who's specific to your industry you work in or the things that you're interested in or some sort of niche like that can be a good place to start as well. Whether it's someone you want to work with locally or someone who is across the country. Again, those are kind of decisions to make from the start. But these 5 questions, once you've narrowed down a few advisors to talk to, these 5 questions can be really good places to kind of narrow down even further and ascertain who's going to be a good fit for you and your family. Okay, question number 1, very simply, of all of these questions, this is maybe the best one to consider asking. And it's, are you a fiduciary advisor at all times? The reason you phrase it that way is because there are kind of 3 types of advisors. There are those who are fiduciaries at all times, there are those who are fiduciaries sometimes, and there are fiduciaries never. And so you really need to determine which advisor you're working with and really what fiduciary duty does that advisor owe to you. To clarify, a fiduciary is someone who works in your best interests. Some advisors do that at all times. They're often fee-only advisors who have taken maybe some fiduciary oath, whether it's through the designations that they have, like a CFP or some other designation. Maybe it's an organization that they adhere to that requires them to be a fiduciary at all times. Some advisors are fiduciaries sometimes, but then they're not fiduciaries at other times. These are often what we call fee-based advisors, where maybe they are fiduciaries in offering you advice and guidance in your financial plan, but maybe they sell you an insurance product or some sort of annuity or something on the side that comes with a conflict of interest and that they are paid a commission or compensated in selling you that product. They're incentivized to sell it to you. The last one are advisors who have no fiduciary duty whatsoever. Often they adhere to what's called a suitability standard. Regardless of which of these you decide to go with, it's important to understand who are you working with and what fiduciary duty do they owe to you. Is it something that they're a fiduciary at all times and always acting in your best interests? Is it some of the time? Is it not at all? Important for you to ask those questions or just to understand up front kind of what the duties owed to you are. Second important question, what are all of the fees I will pay you? This is important to ask in this way because there's kind of 2 fees that are often comes up in working with an advisor. There are those paid directly to the advisor by you for typically maybe it's financial planning or advice or ongoing guidance or investment management. And then there's also what are called fund level fees, or expense ratios you might expect to pay for buying or holding an individual investment. It's important to know what these two fees are so that when you go to work with an advisor, you understand what you're paying on an annual given basis. Maybe they can give you an exact number, maybe they can give you a rough range, but regardless, you should have an idea of what those fees are so that you go in and know what you're going to pay. From the advisor side of things, a fee-only advisor is typically going to charge a percentage of the assets that they manage, often referred to as AUM, assets under management, or maybe it's an hourly rate that they charge you for advice, for rebalancing your portfolio or building you a financial plan. Or maybe it's a flat fee each year. Maybe it's $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever the fixed amount is. And they'll just disclose all of this to you. They should be very upfront about it. This is not like a combative process, and you should not be afraid to ask. They'll tell you directly what those amounts are, roughly what they should be. Those are typically what we call fee-only advisors. Fee-based advisors, like we described, are those who are going to maybe have some component of what we just described in that fee-only kind of bucket, if you will, but they're also maybe paid some sort of commission on products or investments that they put clients into. The last bucket are what we refer to as commissioned advisors, and basically they are paid on selling clients different products that are pay them a commission. And maybe one of these is a better fit for you. It's really just kind of a personal preference. I would say that it's important to know that if there are conflicts of interest that arise from especially those kind of commissioned products or even on the fee-based side, to understand what those might be so that they're disclosed to you over time so you can understand what they are. Okay, question number 3. Have you ever been cited by some regulatory body or for some disciplinary reason? Whether it's by a state or federal entity or even some sort of professional designation that you carry, like a certified financial planner. The reason for this is pretty straightforward. I think it's good to know what kind of the background of an advisor is. If they have a ton of different issues that they've had to address over their career, maybe that is a red flag to consider working with someone else. Just my personal opinion. Certainly you can kind of decide for yourself on this. It's all a matter of kind of your personal preference. But regardless of what you decide, it is really important to understand if someone has encountered something in the past and you're comfortable working with them, you need to understand what that was and how it was addressed and how the advisor handled it. All really important things to understand when you're hiring someone to deal with something as important as your financial goals, your personal financial information, and managing your finances on an ongoing basis. If it's helpful, I've included a link in the description where you can research individual advisors to gain an understanding of what their kind of backgrounds might look like. Okay, 4th question that I love this question. I kind of came up with it. If you Google there's tons of these lists. If you Google, questions to ask a financial advisor, there's a ton of them. I don't see this one often, and I am biased because I came up with it, but I think it's a good question to ask. What is the best piece of advice you have given a client recently? And you ask this question for 2 reasons. Number 1, their answer is going to provide you the breadth of knowledge that they have on different planning topics and kind of inform what an experience or engagement with that advisor might look like. Maybe it's tax planning, a tax strategy they implemented for a client, like doing backdoor Roth IRAs or doing Roth conversions in retirement to be more tax efficient over time. Maybe it's identifying a need to update their estate plan, or that their estate plan was 20 years old or was 5 years old, but the trustee was no longer involved in their lives, or whatever the example might be. You're looking for things and ways that the advisor is bringing value to the client outside of just investments. And that's kind of the second point of this question. It's perfectly fine for an advisor to answer this question and say some sort of investment-based suggestion. I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but if the answer is an investment-based answer, ask a follow-up question like, okay, what's another example? Okay, what's another example? And if all of those examples are investments, that's a good key indicator that the advisor is just an investment advisor or investment manager. And that's okay, that's not a bad thing. But if you are looking for someone who offers a more in-depth engagement than purely managing your investment portfolios, this question tells you that exactly. What is the best piece of advice you've given a client recently? I love that question. All right, we've come to the end. Question number 5. This is a question to really just ask yourself. It's kind of just more of a generalistic question of, what kind of vibe do I get from this person or this advisor? Is it someone I could see myself working with for years and years to come? Working with an advisor, I view it like a relational business. The clients I work with, I set out to work with them for decades, long periods of time. If they're retiring today, I'm going to be working with them for many, many years to come. That's the full intent and objective for me as the advisor. And I think you want to make your alignment or kind of your objective as the client to be the same, that this is someone I trust, who I know can lead with empathy, can understand my financial situation, my family dynamics, and really help me identify and work towards my personal custom financial goals, not just rebalancing my portfolio every 6 months and calling me on my birthday, right? We want something a little bit more than that. Or maybe we don't, but I think that's the way I view the thought process to this question, or kind of the way that you might think about this question in general. I think an easy way to think about this too is you have your financial life, which is kind of like assets, liabilities, income, expenses, things you'd see on like a balance sheet or an income statement. All of them are very metric driven. They're all numerical values. It's all what I call financial data points. But those financial data points can inform or decide the ways that we go about working towards your personal financial goals. Maybe it's traveling the world, retiring early, funding healthcare expenses, or paying for college for kids. Whatever those objectives or goals might be, those data points kind of inform our capacity to do that or make changes to that to then reach those goals sooner or reach them in general. And so I think that that's a good thought process to have, is can my advisor help me align those two primary components of my life, kind of my personal goals and really my financial situation as well. So that is it. 5, I think, key questions to ask any financial advisor. Again, you could shoot an email to someone as a good starting place for any of these. It provides a good kind of foundation upon which to ask further questions and get more information and really meet with someone to determine what kind of value are they going to bring to my situation, and is it someone I'm going to work with or want to work with for a really long period of time. I am Scott Sturgeon, Senior Wealth Advisor at Oriad Wealth Partners. Thank you for watching today. 2 ways you can connect with us if any of this has resounded with you. First is subscribing to our newsletter, Views from the Top. It comes out every 2 weeks. Check it out in the link in the description below. Or if this video has been especially resounding, by all means, I'd encourage you to schedule time with me. There is a link in our description below for just a 30-minute initial consultation to talk about you, your financial goals, and whether working with Oriad Wealth Partners can bring value to your financial situation. By no means are you going to hurt my feelings if you don't schedule. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.